Many people dream of retirement. They make videos about retiring early, they celebrate it when it happens, and quite frankly, many people are obsessed with it. But what they're not seeing is how unnatural retirement is to human nature. If you're new here, my name is Dani and I'm a first-year medical student in Canada. On my channel, I share my strategies for life and some tips for aspiring medics. I'll start off with a question, and feel free to reply back in the comments. Have you ever found yourself doing absolutely nothing and feeling satisfied? Not watching Netflix or playing video games, but quite literally doing nothing. Now take that one experience and apply it to every single day for years of your life. Would you still get up in the morning if you had nothing planned ahead of you? I'll share a story from my undergraduate studies, where at the end of every semester, we would have several weeks to study for and write our exams. I was incredibly busy studying, and I found ways to methodically plan out my days to try and optimize for the highest grades possible. My drive to become a doctor gave me a well-defined purpose to study that drove my everyday activity. This purpose is my ikigai. But if you're not familiar with ikigai, it's often viewed as a Japanese secret for a long and happy life. It roughly translates to a reason for being, or the reason why you wake up in the morning. A cohort study has shown that people with ikigai are more likely to live longer than those without it. They're also more likely to be educated, employed, and married. This brings me to what happened after exams. Immediately after finishing all of my exams, there was this feeling of emptiness, and my purpose, my ikigai, was torn away from me. That feeling of emptiness fades as you reorient yourself and find a new ikigai. The holiday between one semester and another became a time for laziness and bad habits. From eating unhealthy food to sleeping for far too long and mindlessly watching Netflix, just because I lacked a purpose. This same transition occurs at a larger scale during retirement, when you're suddenly relieved of all of your duties all at once, and suddenly you have 56 hours a week on your plate to decide what to do with. I imagine that I would probably be drawn to the same faults that I was during the holidays. Retirement has been hyped up as this time to golf, take a vacation, and relax. The problem is that without a purpose in life, you don't keep your brain engaged. There's evidence that there's a significant cognitive decline when you go on to retire, because we stop tasking our brains with cognitively complex tasks at a high enough frequency. The adage of use it or lose it in psychology definitely applies here. It also applies to liking and subscribing, so make sure to do that, or it may not be possible tomorrow. Not only does our cognitive capacity decline in retirement, but so do our social networks. We as humans are incredibly social beings. One of the strongest predictors for happiness is our social connections, and a big risk factor for an early death is, in fact, loneliness. I've spent time volunteering in seniors' homes and palliative care wards where residents and patients face significant amounts of loneliness. Oftentimes, the single positive point in their day is when family members or a volunteer visits them. Although I'm unlikely to get along perfectly with everyone at work all the time, maintaining the social network associated with my job is likely to keep me both happier and healthier. Now, you might think that working any job for an extended period of time is bound to be boring, even if it's working as a doctor. That brings me to another point that I'd like to touch on, which is the single-dimensional lens that many people view their careers through. The traditional path in life is that you go to school for something, you become good at an employable skill, and then you go work until the day you retire. What's wrong with that timeline is that it suggests that we're only capable of having one career, and that based on that, we're not retrainable to do anything else. I anticipate that for my future, I'll be spending a good amount of time as a practicing physician, but I definitely like to be pursuing other possible careers throughout my life. Maybe I'll start a public health consultancy firm or do something that is entirely unrelated to medicine. In my short 20 years of life, I've noticed that we find the most enjoyment in things that are novel. The first time you visit New York City is likely to be the most enjoyable, with diminishing returns every time you repeat the trip. This is because our brains love novelty. Novelty produces a dopamine rush in our brains. Novelty produces a dopamine rush in our brains, which makes us happy. Before you tell me that it isn't possible to pursue many different careers in your life and be proficient at them, let me tell you about an Italian man. He spent his professional life pursuing many different things, and one of his most well-known works was the painting Mona Lisa. Aside from being a remarkable artist, he was also a legendary engineer, physiologist, and anatomist. His name? Leonardo da Vinci.
Da Vinci?
If he was able to accomplish all this in his 67 years of life, I'm sure that you're able to pursue multiple careers in your lifetime where you are likely to live longer than he did. The last thing I'd like to touch on is why retirement exists in the first place. Interestingly, retirement is a new concept that didn't exist until the 19th century, where it was invented in Germany. The German government set a retirement age of 65 at a time when the average life expectancy was 67. The very reason that it was implemented was because of a fear that older people would take away jobs from younger people entering the job market. So if you're curious why 65 was and continues to be the typical age of retirement, it's simply because of how close it was to the average lifespan at the time, which made providing government benefits to retirees something that wasn't particularly expensive. With improvements in life expectancy over time, and pensions becoming a much less common phenomenon, retirees now face an increased financial burden. It has also made saving up money for the sole purpose of sustaining yourself in older age a commonality. You can continue to sustain yourself on your own income for longer, reducing the need for significant retirement savings. For myself, I don't plan on retiring. I would rather have a reason for getting out of bed in the morning while prioritizing my mental capabilities, social connections, and financial health. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more on my strategies for life, as well as my experiences in medical school.